Hello, I'm James Tiburon with Earthkeeper, and I am joined today with Dr. Robert Schoch and Graham Hancock. And so I wanted to welcome both of these gentlemen to Colorado for the conference that we are going to have. Both of these gentlemen are incredible academics that are bringing forth information that we consider to be so vitally important for humanity to learn our true origins. And so, to start with you, Graham, you have a new book coming out that is Magicians of the Gods.
It's called Magicians of the Gods. It's the sequel to my best-known book, which was Fingerprints of the Gods, which was published 20 years ago in 1995. Magicians of the Gods is a completely new book. It's not an update of Fingerprints of the Gods, but the fact is that there has been such a deluge of new information that supports the concept of a lost civilization going back 12,000 years ago or more, information that has come out in the last 20 years, that I felt compelled to produce a new book on this and to bring that information together between two covers.
Yes. And the book will be available later this year, later in 2015?
Okay, the UK edition, published by Hodder and Stoughton, is coming out on the 10th of September, which is really soon.
Yes.
The US edition is St. Martin's Press. I'm trying to get that book out in November. At the moment, they would like to publish it in February, but I'm hoping that we'll bring the release date of the book forward to November.
Yes.
There's a chance we will. We'll see.
The presentations that you provided today were just, and yesterday, were absolutely fascinating.
Thank you.
And the same for Dr. Schoch. And Robert, your book, Forgotten Civilization, covers similar topics. Can you speak a bit about
that? I mean, I think what we're finding is that civilization, and I call it Forgotten Civilization for the title of the book, is that we have civilization going back before the end of the last ice age. The end of the last ice age, I'm using the geological dating of 9700 BC. People argue, within a century. But the point is that civilization did not originate, as the standard dogma says, between, say, 4,000, 3,000 BC, mere 5,000, 6,000 years ago. But we have what I'm calling an earlier cycle of civilization that goes back approximately 10,000 BC and older, and I think that's something that we both agree on, have been working on a very long time, coming in some cases from different points of view, sometimes very similar points of view. For instance, you've written about, and I've certainly worked on quite a bit, the Sphinx and the redating of the Sphinx. We have things like Göbekli Tepe now in southeastern Turkey that goes back to that earlier.
Well, I think your work on the Sphinx, Robert, is just absolutely crucial work in this field.
Absolutely.
And you were subjected to grievous attacks by the academic community for daring to suggest that the Sphinx might be older. But what the new evidence that's coming out, Göbekli Tepe and a number of other sites around the world, is providing a context for that. And suddenly the notion of a 12,000-year-old Sphinx doesn't seem so crazy at all. It seems, really something that should be explored.
Yeah, I think it is actually fitting now into a context. And something I was told, you remember the days back in the early 90s, well, where's the other evidence? Where's their independent evidence? Oh, there's no context for civilization, for a Sphinx or other sophisticated monumental structures back at that period in time. And now we have
it. We have that context popping up all over the world. And here is how a paradigm changes. That paradigms never change overnight. Paradigms have to be overwhelmed by new evidence.
Overwhelmed by new evidence and waiting for the old generation, I hate to say it, to die off.
It's
physically
true.
Die off, or at least retire.
It's true. Because paradigms, unfortunately, are very ideological, and they get locked into people's framework and their sense of reality. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to change one. But little by little, the new evidence accumulates. The old paradigm cannot explain it. The strongest proponents of the old paradigm begin to reach the end of their natural life cycle. New minds come in, and a new idea becomes accepted.
And I'm finding that because I teach at Boston University. And what I'm finding in academia, and I don't want to have just rose-colored glasses, I think this is real, is that a new generation now is starting to emerge and to look at these things seriously, because it has been, well, for me, 25 years working on the Sphinx. So we really are talking a generation now.
You're absolutely right. The younger generation, something extraordinary is happening. There's a huge opening of minds. Perhaps it's because of the internet definitely plays a role, that people have access instantly to information that they didn't have before. But I notice a huge shift in consciousness taking place, and a growing awareness of the extraordinary possibilities in our past.
Now, you've both spoken about solar radiation, about comets, and about an ice age that ended.
Yeah.
And can you share a little bit about
Sure.
that?
I think that something that's very important and no one can disagree with at this point is that we have very strange things going on at the end of the last ice age. We have what is known as the Younger Dryas, which is a period of about 1,200 years, depending on how you date, but I would, as a geologist, say about 1,200 years, where it was starting to get warmer from the last glacial maximum, when the ice was thickest, it was coldest, it was starting to warm up, and it was doing that somewhat gradually, slowly. Then you have this cold snap, and you have this dramatic cold snap about 10,900, 10,800, depending on how you date it, BC, and it gets very, very cold. Then about 1,200 years later, this incredible warming, which literally brings us out of the last ice age. So that can be agree. That's the geologic record. Now, we can argue about and we can hypothesize what was causing that to occur. There's the hypothesis of a comet bringing the Younger Dryas, initiating the Younger Dryas, which makes some sense from, blocking the sun and debris and that type of thing. What I've actually focused on primarily in my work, and this is the subtitle of the book, is my book is Forgotten Civilization, my most recent book, Forgotten Civilization, subtitled The Role of Solar Outbursts in Our Past and Future. And I focus not on the initiator of the Younger Dryas, but what I believe brought the Younger Dryas to a close in 9700 BC, and my hypothesis and what I see the evidence indicating is that there was a major solar outburst. And so there's probably a couple of things happening here, but what I've really focused on was 9700 BC and what brought the final termination of the Younger Dryas, and therefore the final termination of the Ice Age.
I think Robert and I are looking at the same mystery. You have this period of extraordinary turbulence. I mean, it's difficult to conceive of it in modern terms. Nobody alive on Earth today has lived through an episode like that episode between 10,800 or 10,900 BC and 9,600 or 9,700 BC. That 1,200 year period of absolute chaos and horror on the Earth. And you know what we're both looking at, and others are working on this as well. What was the agencies that caused that? And one theory is that a comet was involved, and another theory that Robert is working very strongly with is the sun being involved in these changes. And my view is that the jury is not in on either of these matters yet. What we have is a mystery, and it's great that people are coming at that mystery from different perspectives and looking at the possibilities.
And I also want to point out that the theories are not necessarily incompatible.
Not at all.
Because you have different things happening at the beginning and at the end. There's also evidence that cometary activity sets off solar activity.
Exactly.
They are not interrelated. Even in the modern day, people have been documenting when you have comets diving into the sun, or fragments of comets diving into the sun, you have major coronal mass ejections,
CMEs,
solar outbursts, CMEs. So I think what's really important for our purpose right now for this discussion is that you have that turbulent period and you have advanced civilization which gets essentially extinct,
which existed before that turbulent period and vanishes, and then everything that we've been taught about history by the mainstream, it all happens after that period. And they forget that period existed. Right in the backyard of history, we have this huge enigma which is not being taken account of by the mainstream historians and archaeologists. And that's why I would say maybe their work since 9600 BC is pretty solid. They built a nice house, but that house of history is built on foundations of sand.
Exactly, because since about 9,700, 9,600 BC, you can see in the archaeological records, or primitive and it sort of builds up. And what I'm suggesting, just in my talk now and in the book, is that this was essentially what we could call Dark Age after the fall of that earlier cycle of civilization. So yes, the historians and archaeologists have it right since that period, but what they fail to acknowledge is that there was a major civilization, major sophistication at an earlier period that was brought to an end by natural catastrophes.
Exactly.
So the concepts of Atlantis, of other lost civilizations are coming much more in.
They start to make perfect sense. And as Robert and I have both pointed out, Plato's date for the destruction of Atlantis ties in exactly.
And can you review Plato's date just briefly for the
9,000 years before the time of Solon. Solon lived in 600 BC. 9,600 BC, 11,600, 11,700 years ago, the traumatic end of the Younger Dryas, a rapid period of global warming, huge floods hitting the world ocean.
Yeah, I don't think it's just coincidental that Plato just happened to come up with that date.
Yes.
I mean, you know, that would be beyond credibility.
Beyond credibility.
Last question. What would be your idea of the time of construction of the Great Pyramid and any ideas of how it would have been constructed? Each of you, if you'll take that briefly.
Okay, I will take it briefly first, because I'm not sure if we agree on this necessarily.
We may find we do.
We may find we do. Right now, I don't know how it was constructed.
Yes.
I'm not even going to address that right now, because that's a complex issue, and I'm not an engineer. I've spoken to many engineers. However you look at this, is not a trivial feat to construct it. And I've been in the Great Pyramid many times, as of course you have. I've been up in the relieving chambers and seen the huge monoliths of granite that are up. I mean, this is
the alignments, the
alignments, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but when was it built? I am happy with at least parts of it being Old Kingdom. For instance, I think this might be your opinion now, up in the relieving chambers, those cartouches and whatnot, I'm convinced that they're genuine old
Absolutely,
kingdom.
Because they disappear between the blocks.
That's
you shine a powerful light into the gaps between the blocks, and there are gaps between the blocks up there, and you can see that they disappear.
You can see.
Nobody could afford them. Now, the cartouche of Khufu is in plain view, and it's possible that it was forged. We can't write that off. But it's a minor point.
It's a minor point. So I would say that what you see today, the facade, the major structure, I'm comfortable with that being Old Kingdom, 3rd millennium BC. Now, on the other hand, based on my analysis and working with it and having been there many times, I think, for instance, this subterranean chamber deep under the pyramid is much older.
Me too.
That goes back to this a much earlier period of time. I think that at one point there may have been, we'll call it like a platform built over it, which is now incorporated into what we see as the Great Pyramid. So I think, like many of these structures, you have additions to additions to additions. That this
constantly being overbuilt.
Yes.
I completely agree with you, as a matter of fact. I think the big question marks are over the Sphinx and over the megalithic temples, so-called, in front of the Sphinx. The possibility of those going back to the 12,000 roughly period is very, very high. But I think the pyramids themselves, in the form we see them today, we cannot divorce the ancient Egyptians from those. And I think that I think that actually what we're looking at Giza is a very nuanced site. It has, what the archaeologists have done is they've just taken everything and lumped it together into the Old Kingdom period, whereas in fact we're looking at a site with great complexity. The ancient Egyptians were the inheritors of the knowledge from the earlier time, and they were simply, I believe, fulfilling an earlier plan. But we cannot separate them from the Great Pyramid, and it would be wrong to do so. The Great Pyramid, the three Great Pyramids of Giza, rightly and properly do belong to the period of around about 2,500 to 3,000 BC, but they are built on prehistoric foundations.
That, I think, is the fundamental
That's the crucial
issue.
point.
They are built on prehistoric foundations, there is something that goes back much earlier.
Way earlier, way back to 12,000 or more.
That's right.
Prehistoric foundations, and you can see elements of those prehistoric foundations, and right out there in plain view, the Great Sphinx, with its precipitation-induced weathering, is being proclaiming to us loudly, and you and John West were the first to really pick this up, that the Great Sphinx does not fit into the picture that Egyptologists, the very simplistic picture that Egyptologists want to give us of, in fact, a very complex and nuanced site.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for your time, and thank you on behalf of humanity for the work that you're doing. I think it is vitally important, and we have a tremendous respect for both of you. So, Graham Hancock, Dr. Robert Schoch, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.